Did you say Cal Newton first?
All right, let me do a couple of announcements really quick. We'll take your notes out. The announcements. First off, maps. The maps we do tomorrow. Any questions on the maps? Anything? So the map, which is the last page of that Civil War packet I gave you. Everything happened here. You got to figure out a way to get them all in. Walking distance of the two capitals. Next, I originally put the other reading for Wednesday. I sent it to you early, but gave you a little bit of time. But I'm just looking at the way the schedule works out. We're doing it on Thursday. I'm going to give you one more day. So that's the reading 647 to 652. It's all home front stuff. 659 to 665, 669, 675. Quiz on Thursday. This Thursday, yeah. Just be a quiz. Just a quiz, just a reading quiz off the reading. Just a reading quiz will be like, I think 12 questions. Next, I was going to do the DBQ this week, but I decided to give it do next week just because the timing didn't work out. So I also want to show the cause. Second part of that video. So I'm going to talk about how to write a DBQ, a document-based question, on Thursday. I'll give you some material. We'll talk about it. And then we will do the DBQ in class on Thursday. So it is an essay test. So I'll go over how to do it. And it's an essay test, but instead of just using your own information, you also have to tie your own information to documents you read. And I'll give you a number of documents. It is more work than a regular essay. I'll read your documents and use them, but it also gives you great hints. I keep on reminding you of this. You got to do it. So it's more work, but remember, it's giving you huge hints and will help trigger memories. So just don't forget that, because it is more work than a regular essay, because you have to read through documents. Some of you already done it. There'll be certain things you need for my class. I'll go through it. So we'll talk about it then. It is about the events that directly led to secession. So we'll be a little past that in class, but it'll give you enough time to go through it. And then Tuesday's a good day. And we quit right before this. You want to see the dog jump one more time? You want to see it? Yeah. All right, we'll do it one more time. We'll watch Stella. Yay! That is one happy dog. All right. They run up to Thanksgiving. Are you glad the long Thanksgiving break is finally over? Whew, thank goodness. And do you know what month it is? Huh? It's December, isn't it? Anybody know what December is?
It's the last month.
It's limbo. Starting tomorrow, we have to limbo. When I mean we, I mean you. Limbo month begins. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we have a limbo month. And you will be limbo. And by the end of the month, you should be able to go limbo under this desk. Okay. I know. Yeah, it'll be expected of you, or you go back to first grade. And you'll be, they will chew you up and spit you out. Have you ever been around first graders? Limbo month. Okay, we're setting up limbo month. That means into the classroom you limbo and out of the classroom you limbo. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? In fact, I should probably get out the limbo pole. It's limbo month. It's tinfoil. It's tinfoil. Yeah, my mind tinsel distract. I hope so I can decide. I am like a god in many ways. All right. The Compromise of 1850. Who was the president who said, let's divide the Mexican section into 2 free states and would refuse any compromise? Fillmore, no, he signed the compromise. Who was the one who would have no compromise? And what happened to Taylor? Of Colorado. Who? would write the Compromise of 1850, the Great Compromise, but refused to break it up. Who was the Great Compromise who would write it? Who? You said, someone said. Yeah, Henry Clay. And who would give his last major speech? Because like Clay, he too would die soon after this. When the old guard, the Whig, who said he comes to you not as a Massachusetts man, not as a Northern man, but as an American, we must pass the compromise, which did not pass. Who was it? Webster, who looked vaguely like an owl. And who was it said two presidents? Calhoun. But who were those members of the Southern congressmen, members of Congress who were rabidly pro-slavery, refused to compromise? What were they called? New younger members. Fire eaters. Fillmore agreed to support the compromise. Who broke up the bill? Raoul C. Calhoun. Yes, it was Stephen Douglas. And the compromise of 1850 had 5 parts, but the fugitive slave law would be the most controversial of all of them. So let's get to what happened after this. The 1852 presidential election, the Democrats are riding kind of a wave of euphoria. They saved the Union. Franklin Pierce was called a doughface. He was from Maine. A doughface meant a Northerner who supported pro-slavery policies. Franklin Pierce of Maine. And the Democrats were riding this wave of we saved the country with Stephen Douglas. The Whigs tried one more time for the war hero, Winfield Scott. And the Free Soil Party, they picked Hale, but the Free Soil Party lost their thunder after the compromise. And remember, third parties do not do well in the United States. It's winner take all. So, a couple things about the election. Pierce just simply wrote compromise. We did the compromise. And even though he's from Maine, a New England state, he supported policies that the fire eaters wanted. And that's why they call them a doughface. What color is dough? It's kind of white. And the dough meant he had white dough, white, covering his principles. Now, it's 1852 logic, and it doesn't make sense, and it is intensely racist. But it's talking about white for the Northern White Republic and white only. But you remove the dough and it's blackface, meaning supporting the pro-slavery policies and stuff. It seems a little off to me, but that's why they call them doughface. The Whigs thought one more time of the war hero, but remember, Washington was a war hero, London president. Andrew Jackson with the cool nickname Old Hickory. William Henry Harrison, the cool nickname Old Hippie Canoe. Zachary Taylor, rough and ready. Oh, rough and ready. Do you remember what Winfield Scott's nickname? Old Fuss and Feathers, which doesn't sound very tough. It didn't work. This election was a sweeping Democratic victory. And it would be the last time until 1932 that a candidate for president would win the majority of both the North and the South. This would not happen again until Franklin Roosevelt would be elected in 1932. A lot of votes for Whigs, but very few electoral votes. And the Free Soil Party really lost it. They lost their steam. The last election for both of these major election. So Pierce came in. Pierce is considered one of the worst presidents in American history. Not just for his policies, but also the fact that he was partially there. His wife passed away right after the election. And he was already kind of an alcoholic. He became a raging alcoholic. And that affected his entire administration for obvious reasons. And one more thing. Most of you were born in 2008. Is that right? 2008? The president, when you were born, was George W. Bush. His great-great-great-great-grandfather was Pierce. Bush's mom was a Pierce. So one of the strange connections, yeah. Right on, but still, Bush be president.
Yeah.
But you were born on election day in 2008? Good to remember. All right, so the same year Uncle Tom's Cabin came out. And this, written by Heritage Beecher Stowe, this anti-slavery novel became one of the best-selling novels of the entire 19th century and would infuriate the South. Stowe wrote a pretty amazing novel about the condition of the slaves in the South, considering that she'd never really left Massachusetts. Her brother was also an abolitionist minister, Henry Beecher Stowe, and that's her years afterwards. But Abraham Lincoln met her in 1862. Met her while Lincoln was president. He responded in Lincoln-ish humor. So you're the little lady who started this. I know. But if you were caught with this book in the South or in slave state, you could potentially be lynched. This book would be banned in the South for starting a slave rebellion, and the South absolutely consequences. There's a nonfiction book called 7 Years a Slave that also was a bestseller, the second best-selling book of the decade. And there'll be a movie made about this about 7 years ago. All right. It's really good. Called 7 Years a Slave, but it is intense. They show what slavery is like. It was a man who was kidnapped, and because he was kidnapped, because he had dark skin, said that he was a fugitive and forced into slavery. It shows it. It's brutal. It's very good. Wow, is it brutal? Also, even though it wasn't really a big issue in 1852, it would become as big as it could have been. It would become huge by 1853. These fugitive slave laws. They basically told states, doesn't matter what your laws are, you must obey federal law. And the most important federal law was to catch these fugitives, is that any citizen must join a posse. When I mean citizen, I mean white, male, adult. And there was no set age yet what adult was. So basically, every male in here would have to join a posse. You know what a posse is? Posse, those are people that are temporarily deputized to chase down the criminal. So, for example, someone robbed the bank, do they be temporarily deputized to run down the bank out of Western from the South? You had to, or you go to jail, regardless of your view. And then whoever was accused of being a fugitive would go in front of a judge. And these judges would be paid for deciding whether or not they're free, a free person, or in a fugitive running away from their master. They got one. So they got money. That's the arrow with money. For the paperwork involved. So this wasn't a jury, just a judge made the decision, a state judge. They got $5 if they found them to be free. But because it took more paperwork, it was $10 if they were found to be a fugitive and sent back. Now, supposedly more paperwork. Doesn't that sound like a bribe? Doesn't that sound like if you're a dishonest judge, you could make a little bit of money? $10 in was a heck of a lot of money. So this infuriated the North. Infuriated them. And northern states, especially Pennsylvania on north, but all of them would pass this. Even states that were hostile to fugitives, like here, didn't like this infringement on state laws. They passed laws we kind of uniformly dub personal liberty laws basically to try to stop or slow down the Fugitive Slave Act. And you can see from these posters here, read and ponder the Fugitive Slave Law. Colored people, watch out for kidnappers and slave catchers. Because they would just run down anybody with a darker complexion. Just say that they're a runaway, and they knew which judges to take them to. And kidnapping them into slavery. And regardless if they're a fugitive or not, this is kidnapping people and forcing them into enslavement until they die. And it is brutal beyond comprehension. Well, this infuriated the South. They saw this as a direct attack, not only on their way of life, not only stealing their property, but Southern politicians also said that this will trigger a slave rebellion. And they begin to coalesce their point of view as this. The Constitution protects our property, and therefore they wanted federal protection of slavery, regardless if it is in territories or states. So they wanted to supersede state laws, especially in the North, to protect slavery. And they would give this a name by 1854. Federal protection. Superseding state laws, they called it, ironically, states' rights. Even though it supersedes states' rights. It should remind you of laissez-faire economics. Remember, laissez-faire economics was laissez-faire in competition with direct aid for business from government, which is an exact contradiction. This is too. Don't mess with the states if they want to have slavery, but make sure states that don't want slavery, make sure that the federal government will protect our system. And so, this is big, states' rights. We'll come back to this idea, remind you again about this, because after the Civil War, the South will kind of regurgitate this. Southern politicians beginning in the 1880s, 1890s, and say that the Civil War was not about slavery. It was just states defending their rights. Of course, nobody wanted that during the Civil War. So we will come back to states' rights. We are not done. It was a complete contradiction and a lie. Also at the same time, Southern, basically soldiers of fortune trying to get rich, much like land speculators trying to take land from American Indians. They began to go south, and they dubbed them filibusters, which is the Dutch word for pirate, kind of a bastardization of the Dutch word for pirate. And they went to Latin American countries that had just won their independence, trying to take them over to be annexed by the United States. And remember, we have examples of this in our past. Texas did that. Remember, Texas won their independence, then asked to be annexed. California won their independence, it has to be annexed. Why? A better way to put this is, they want this to be annexed to become what kind of states? Slave states. Most famously, William Walker, here he is in his uniform from the Mexican War, actually took over Nicaragua, had a coup, and tried to get annexed. And there he is taking power in Nicaragua. A military coup with a few hundred, basically just thugs, mostly from southern states. And they overthrew the government in Nicaragua. They actually tried to expand. They tried to invade Costa Rica. This is now kind of like the most hallowed ground of Costa Rica. It's really beat back the invaders from Nicaragua. Tried to be annexed, did not happen. The U.S. would not annex them for the same reason it went to annex Texas. And eventually Nicaragua would overthrow them, and that's what would happen to Walker. But these thugs were trying to overthrow governments all over Latin America. Nicaragua was the only kind of success. Fortunately for Nicaragua, the nation of Nicaragua, that didn't happen. And they tried to get Cuba too. And that leads to what's called a filibuster. A filibuster would become a term for the unlimited debate in the Senate, where basically the Senate would be taken hostage by debate. Since 1804, there is unlimited debate. There can be no vote on an issue till debate is done. So senators would begin to hold the floor and debate to hold up a vote. And eventually, if they talked long enough, the Senate would drop the vote. So they would talk and talk and talk and talk. I mean, literally, they could stand there, and as long as they could stand and talk, they held the floor. It's called the talking filibuster. This is not the Constitution. This is Senate rules, because it's still Senate rules to this day. So they could talk for hours. And here's an example of the debate. You know, it rarely happened, but everyone's falling asleep, reading the paper, not doing anything because of the filibuster. And the filibuster rule could hold up the Senate, specifically used to stop civil rights bills by the 1940s and 50s. Most famously, Strom Thurmond of South Carolina held the entire floor of the United States Senate alone for 24 hours. He talked 24 hours straight. Could not leave, could not go to the bathroom, could not leave, had to talk. Read his grandma's recipes. He read the phone book of Charleston, South Carolina. He read the newspaper. The senators can do anything they want as long as they hold the floor. And then other Southern senators got up to stop the Civil Rights Bill of 1957. They held up the floor for 64 days. And the bill was crushed. They passed something, but it was meaningless. Tried to get in 64, but this time Northern Democrats held out and they got the bill passed against Southern Democrats, ironically. And so they changed the law. And now it requires 60 votes of the Senate to stop filibuster. 60 votes. And that's because the Southerners trying to stop the Civil Rights Bill. So basically what happens is this today. All the senator has to do is say, I want to debate this bill. And they immediately do a vote to end the debate. And if they don't get 60 votes, the debate does not end and the bill is destroyed. It ends. They won't get a vote. And so it requires a supermajority to get almost any bill passed in the United States Senate. Now, it didn't happen very much until Bill Clinton was president and Republicans started using it to great effect. Democrats did a little bit for George W. Bush, and then the Republicans filibustered every single bill while there was President Obama. So what did Democrats do when there was President Trump? They filibustered every bill. Then what did Republicans do when there was President Biden? They filibustered every bill. And what happens now? So they filibuster every bill. What gets passed? Do you want to know why we have so many problems today? Why the government will probably shut down the budget? It's because they filibustered. Nothing gets done. We are completely and totally dysfunctional. I mean, it's unreal. And when they do pass a budget bill, I guarantee you, nobody wants it. And they'll find out all the mistakes. Wow, are they finding mistakes just from the last budget bill they passed 2.5 weeks? They're finding all kinds of stuff. Can people see their health insurance? So the point is, they took that name from this. That is why we are so dysfunctional. And that's why everybody hates Congress. And Senate could change the rules, but it's easier for them to not do anything. So, the Austin Manifesto was a document, it's basically a letter that would be sent from a foreign minister's meeting in Austin, Belgium, by the Secretary of State, another dough-face, James Buchanan. And it said the U.S. should take Cuba. Now, it didn't happen, but you can imagine what's going to happen with this. It's going to freak out the North. They're going to try to annex Cuba. They can make 2 slave states out of it. And here's Buchanan, and this is one of the more famous cartoons with the Austin Manifesto, and they call it the Austrian Doctrine. But these are filibusters threatening Buchanan. But he was a dough-face. Now, it did not happen. Obviously, the U.S. did not annex Cuba. But this shows the divide. But also, Northerners are like the South will not quit till they make every place a slave state. And that leads to the bill that would the Kansas-Nebraska Act, 1854. Stephen Douglas wanted to become president. He had a great success with breaking up the compromise of 1850. But now he wants to be president. He needs another victory. That's a terrible picture of him. He was already known as a little giant, and that makes him look even shorter. When you're pointing up at somebody, it makes him look like you're pointing up at somebody taller than you. So it's one of those funny pictures by a photographer who was being, I think, cruel. Stephen Douglas, he's a Democrat from Illinois. And what he wanted, the last thing for today, is a transcontinental railroad, a northern route that would start in Chicago, which he would not only benefit politically, I got the railroad, but financially because he owned land in his hometown of Chicago, and that's where the terminus would be. But this is not like a true transcontinental railroad from sea to sea. There's already railroads that went They're going into Missouri by this time. So it would connect with the railroads here and go to the Pacific. This was the northern route. He's talking. I know it doesn't seem that north to us. But they need territorial governments. Remember the Missouri Compromise said no slavery north of 3630 in the Louisiana Purchase. And Fire Eater said, if you want your railroad, open those areas up to slavery. If you want your railroad, you must do what we say, or we will stop it in the Senate, a filibuster, and push for a southern route. And Douglas made a deal with the devil to get his bill passed. And this would blow up the country, and that's not where we quit. Goodbye, everybody. See you tomorrow.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, how the wisdom teeth come out? Oh, feel okay now? Oh, sorry. Shoot, it'll get over soon, I hope. Still a little swollen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, damn it. It's the only reason we're here. It's limbo month. Wait for it.